The royal nursery of the empire was the most protected place in 12 star systems. It sat in the heart of the imperial palace on Prime, surrounded by walls of black stone that had stood for 10,000 years. Inside those walls slept the most precious treasures of the dragon race, their bobbies. Head nursemaid had worked in the nursery for 300 years. She was old even by standards, her silver scales showing the marks of age and wisdom. In all her long life, she had never failed at her job. The hatchlings under her care grew strong and healthy. They learned to breathe fire at the proper age. They knew their place in the empire. Everything was perfect. Until the human came, was his name, a small, soft creature from a dying colony on the edge of known space. The empire had taken in many human refugees after the Great Collapse, and most of them worked the lowest jobs, cleaning, carrying, tasks that required no skill and offered no glory. Had been assigned to the maintenance levels beneath the palace 6 months ago, had barely noticed him. Humans were forgettable creatures, no scales, no fire, no claws. They lived for less than 100 years and spent most of that time being cold and fragile. They tolerated them because they were useful for simple work, nothing more. But then the hatchlings started disappearing. The first time it happened, thought she had made a counting error. The nursery held 23 hatchlings, ranging from newborn to 3 years old. One morning she counted only 22. She searched every corner of the nursery, checked every thermal nest, looked behind every feeding station. Nothing. The security feeds showed nothing unusual. The biolocks on every door remained sealed. The ancient magic wards that protected the nursery hummed with power undisturbed. Yet somehow the smallest hatchling, a little female named Bora, was gone. Sent guards to search the palace. They found Bora 4 hours later, 3 levels down in the maintenance tunnels. She was curled up in the lap of the human janitor, sleeping more peacefully than had ever seen her sleep. The human looked terrified when the guards arrived. He held up his hands, showing he meant no harm, and tried to explain in his broken that he had simply found the baby crying in the vents. He had not taken her. He had not done anything wrong. He had just held her until she stopped crying. Took Bora back to the nursery and increased security. She added more sensors to the vents. She posted extra guards at every entrance. She told herself it was a strange accident that would never happen again. It happened again the next night, and the night after that. Within a week was finding 2 or 3 missing hatchlings every morning. They always ended up in the same place, the maintenance levels. They were always with the same person, the human janitor. And they were always doing the same thing, sleeping peacefully in his arms, making soft, happy sounds that bobbies only made when they felt completely safe. This made no sense to. Hatchlings did not like strangers. They bit anyone who was not part of their family or approved staff. They had sharp teeth and hot breath, and they used both on anyone who came too close without permission. Yet they crawled through impossible spaces, squeezed through gaps smaller than their bodies, and traveled 3 levels down through dark tunnels, just to sleep on a human. Ran every test she could think of. She checked the human for hidden technology. She scanned him for unusual energy signatures. She even had a mind reader examine him for any sign of dark magic or mental powers. Nothing. Was exactly what he appeared to be, a simple, unremarkable human with no special abilities at all. Finally, after a month of sleepless nights and growing frustration, called the human to her office. He came quickly, still wearing his cleaning uniform, still carrying his mop and bucket. He was short for a human, barely reaching shoulder, with dark hair and darker eyes. His hands were rough from work, and his clothes smelled of cleaning chemicals. He stood before her desk like a prisoner awaiting judgment, his head bowed and his shoulders tense. "Explain," said. She did not bother with pleasantries. "Why do the hatchlings keep coming to you?" Did not look up. "I do not know, honored nursemaid. I swear on my life I am not taking them. They find me, I do not know how." "They find you." His voice was flat with disbelief. "Through sealed doors and security systems that have never been breached in 10,000 years. Yes, honored nursemaid, I think they come through the air vents, the old ones from before the palace was rebuilt. They are very small spaces, but the bobbies are small too." Leaned forward, her scales shifting from silver to an angry red. "And when they find you, what do you do with them?" "I hold them," said simply. "They are crying when they come to me. They sound cold and scared, so I hold them and talk to them until they fall asleep. Then I try to bring them back, but—" he hesitated. but they hold on very tight, honored nursemaid. They do not want to let go, and I do not want to hurt them by pulling too hard. Cold could not believe what she was hearing. They are dragons. They make their own heat. They cannot be cold. For the first time, looked up and met her eyes. There was something strange in his expression, something that could not identify. It was not fear or guilt or anger. It was something softer, something sad. "With respect, honored nursemaid," he said quietly, "making heat and feeling warm are not the same thing." Stared at him. She had no idea what he meant, and the confusion made her angrier. "The nursery is the finest in the empire," she said coldly. "The thermal nests are worth more than you could earn in 1,000 lifetimes. The temperature is perfectly controlled. The food is the best quality. The staff are trained for years before they are allowed near a hatchling. What could you possibly offer that we do not already provide?" Was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely more than a whisper. "Someone who stays," he said. "Someone who holds them just because they are crying, not because it is their job. Someone who sings to them and tells them stories and falls asleep with them still in their arms." He paused, and something painful crossed his face. "I had a little sister once, honored nursemaid. Before my colony fell, she was afraid of the dark. Every night I would hold her and tell her stories until she fell asleep. I would tell her about heroes who were brave and kind, who always came home to the people they loved." His voice broke slightly. "She died in the collapse. I could not save her. I could not save anyone. But when I hear the bobbies crying in the vents, I hear her, and I cannot just leave them there in the dark, crying alone." Did not know what to say. She had expected tricks, lies, excuses. She had not expected this raw, naked grief from a creature she had barely considered worthy of notice. She dismissed him with a wave of her clawed hand and sat alone in her office for a long time, thinking about warmth and loneliness and the strange, soft creatures who had somehow survived in a galaxy full of fire. The next morning, 4 hatchlings were missing from the nursery. Found them in the maintenance tunnels, piled on top of the human janitor like a nest of sleeping puppies. Was running a fever, his body temperature dangerously high even by human standards, but he had not moved, had not tried to make himself more comfortable, had not done anything that might disturb the sleeping bobbies. He had made himself sick to keep them warm, and looking at his pale, exhausted face, had a terrible feeling that she was missing something very important about humans. She did not know it yet, but everything was about to change. The Emperor had ruled the Empire for 800 years. He had fought in 17 wars, signed peace treaties with 30 different species, and watched 3 of his own children grow old and pass on. Nothing surprised him anymore. Nothing moved him. He had seen too much to feel wonder at anything. But when his advisor told him about the nursery problem, he felt something he had not felt in centuries: curiosity. "A human janitor," he repeated, making sure he had heard correctly. "Yes, Your Majesty," was a young female with scales of deep blue and eyes that missed nothing. She served as his chief advisor on unusual matters, and she was very good at her job. "The hatchlings have been escaping the nursery for over a month. They always go to the same place. They always curl up with the same human. Head nursemaid has tried everything to stop them, but nothing works." "And the human, what does he do with them?" "He holds them, Your Majesty. He talks to them, sings to them, and lets them sleep. When they are found, they are always peaceful and calm. Some of them even seem happy." Raised an eye ridge. Hatchlings were many things: fierce, curious, demanding, but happy was not a word often used to describe them. They were difficult creatures, constantly testing boundaries, always hungry for attention and power. The nursery existed to train them into proper dragons, to shape their fire into something useful rather than dangerous. "I want to see this for myself," the Emperor said, looked surprised but did not argue. She led him down through the palace, past the grand halls and throne rooms, past the military command centers and diplomatic quarters, all the way down to the maintenance levels where the servants worked. The contrast was sharp. Above, everything was grand and beautiful: polished stone, gleaming metal, ancient art worth more than whole planets. Below, the walls were plain gray metal, the air was thick with the smell of cleaning products, and the corridors were barely wide enough for the Emperor's broad shoulders. They found the human in a storage closet, had to lower his massive body and crane his neck to look inside. The closet was barely larger than a bathing pool, filled with shelves of cleaning supplies and old equipment. In the center of the floor, surrounded by mops and buckets, sat the human janitor. He was asleep. His head was tilted back against the wall, his mouth slightly open, his breathing slow and deep. And on his lap, in his arms, against his neck, and even in his jacket pocket were 7 sleeping hatchlings. They were piled on him like he was a nest. One little male had wrapped his tail around the human's arm. A tiny female had burrowed under his shirt, only her snout poking out. Another hatchling was curled on top of his head, somehow balanced despite the human's breathing. Activated her scanner quietly. After a moment, she frowned. "He is sick, Your Majesty," she said softly. "His body temperature is too high. Humans should be around 37 degrees. He is at 39.2. This is dangerous for his species." Studied the scene carefully. He made himself sick, he realized, to keep them warm. "It appears so, Your Majesty. His body is working very hard to produce extra heat. He will likely feel very weak when he wakes up." The emperor was quiet for a long moment. He had ruled for 8 centuries. He had seen countless acts of loyalty and sacrifice from his subjects, all performed in hope of reward or fear of punishment. But this human had nothing to gain. He was not trying to impress anyone. He was not seeking promotion or favor. He was simply sitting in a closet, making himself sick so that a handful of baby dragons could sleep comfortably. "Wake him," said. Gently touched the human's shoulder. Eyes flew open, confused at first, then slowly focusing on the massive dragon standing in the doorway. His face went white. He tried to stand, to bow, to show proper respect, but the hatchlings clung to him with surprising strength, chirping in protest at the disturbance. "Your Majesty, I am so sorry. I did not mean. Please, I did not take them. They came to me. I would never." The words tumbled out in a panicked rush. "Stop," commanded. His voice was not angry, but it carried absolute authority. Stopped moving, stopped talking, stopped breathing for a moment. The hatchlings, sensing his fear, pressed closer to him as if trying to protect him. Slowly, with great care, the emperor lowered himself to the floor of the storage closet. He folded his enormous body into the cramped space, his tail curling behind him, his wings pressed tight against his back. When he was settled, his eyes were level with the humans. "Tell me," said, "why my children prefer a janitor's closet to the finest nursery in the empire." Swallowed hard. He looked down at the hatchlings, then back at the emperor, then at, who gave him a small nod of encouragement. "I think they are lonely, Your Majesty," he said finally. "Lonely?" frowned. "They have each other. They have the best caregivers in 12 star systems. They want for nothing." "They have guards," said carefully, choosing his words like a man walking through a field of fire. "They have schedules and protocols and people who watch them, but no one holds them, just holds them, I mean. Not for feeding or bathing or checking their health, but just because they are small and they want to be held." The emperor was silent, so continued, his voice growing stronger. "When I was a child, my mother worked very hard. She was never home. We had food and clothes and a warm place to sleep, but I remember feeling empty, like something was missing. My grandmother saw this. She would sit with me for hours, doing nothing, just sitting together. She would tell me stories and sing songs and let me fall asleep with my head in her lap. She did not feed me or teach me or give me anything useful, but she made me feel like I mattered." Looked down at the sleeping hatchlings. "I think the bobbies feel the same emptiness. The nursery gives them everything they need to survive, but surviving and feeling safe, those are different things." One of the hatchlings stirred and opened her eyes. She looked at the emperor without fear, yawned widely, and then closed her eyes again, pressing her face against the human's chest. "That is Bora," said softly. "She was the first one to find me. She is very brave. She crawled through the vents alone in the dark just because she heard me humming while I worked. She was so cold when I found her. Not her body was warm, but her eyes were cold, like she had never expected anyone to come when she cried." Felt something shift in his ancient heart. He thought of his own, raised in the nursery with perfect care and perfect distance. He thought of the formal visits, the scheduled interactions, the proper ceremonies. He thought of how they never ran to him with joy, only approached him with respect. "You said you had a sister," the emperor said. "What happened to her?" The human's face changed. Pain filled his eyes, deep and old. "The colony where we lived was attacked. said. "A meteor storm, the shields failed. Everyone was running to the shelters, but my sister, she was only 4 years old. She could not run fast enough. I carried her as far as I could, but—" His voice cracked. "The building collapsed. I woke up 3 days later on a rescue ship. They told me she did not survive. No one from my family survived. I was the only one." Made a soft sound of sympathy. Even the Emperor felt something, pity perhaps, or recognition. He too had lost family. He too knew the weight of surviving when others did not. "So when you hear the hatchlings crying," said slowly, "you hear her." "Yes, your Majesty." His voice was barely a whisper. "I hear her every time, and I cannot leave them. Even if I wanted to, even if you ordered me to, I could not. Some part of me would always go back to that closet where they found me, waiting for a little voice calling in the dark." The Emperor sat in silence for a long time. The hatchlings slept peacefully, their soft breathing the only sound. Finally, he rose to his feet. He said, "I want a full report on human bonding behavior. Everything you can find. I want to understand what this is and why it works." "Yes, your Majesty." Looked down at the human one last time. "You may continue caring for the hatchlings," he said. "For now, we will speak again soon." Bowed as low as he could without disturbing the sleeping bobbies. "Thank you, your Majesty, thank you." The Emperor left the storage closet and walked back through the maintenance tunnels. His mind was full of questions. For the first time in centuries, he felt the fire of curiosity burning in his chest. What were humans really? What strange magic lived in their soft bodies and short lives? And what did it mean that his hatchlings, children of fire and ancient power, chose to sleep in the arms of one? He intended to find out. Spent 3 weeks studying humans. She read every research paper, watched every documentary, and interviewed every human specialist in the Empire. What she learned would change the way understood these strange, soft creatures forever. She presented her findings to Emperor in his private study, a room of ancient stone and flickering firelight where he did his deepest thinking. "Humans," she began, "are the strangest species we have ever encountered." "That is a strong statement," said. "We have met many strange species." "None like humans, your Majesty." Activated a holographic display showing human biology. "Consider their evolution. On their home planet, humans were not the strongest or fastest creatures. They had no claws, no fangs, no natural weapons. Their skin is thin. Their bones break easily. A human child cannot walk for almost a year after birth and requires constant care for nearly 2 decades before becoming independent." 2 decades? Was shocked. Hatchlings could walk within days and were considered adults at 20 years. How did they survive at all? "Through bonding, your Majesty." Changed the display to show brain scans. "Humans evolved to form emotional attachments to anything and everything around them. They bond with their families, their friends, their communities. They bond with animals and plants and even objects. Some humans name their vehicles and speak to them as if they were alive. This seems foolish, but it served a vital purpose." "Which is?" "Cooperation. Humans survived not through individual strength, but through working together. They hunted in groups, raised children in groups, built shelters in groups, and to make groups work, they needed to care about each other deeply and personally. So their brains developed powerful bonding chemicals that create feelings of love, loyalty, and protection." Pulled up another image, a human mother holding her infant. The bond between human parents and children is especially strong because human bodies are so helpless for so long. Evolution favored parents who felt an overwhelming need to protect them. This need is not logical or controlled. It is chemical, automatic, and impossible to ignore. Thought about what he had seen in the storage closet, the human making himself sick to keep the hatchlings warm. So cannot help himself. "Exactly, your Majesty. When a human sees a distressed infant, any infant, not just their own species, their brain releases powerful chemicals. These chemicals reduce fear, increase protective instincts, and create a deep emotional connection. The human will literally risk their own life to protect a baby they have never met before. That seems dangerous for them." "It is. Humans have died protecting children of other species. They have run into burning buildings to save animals they did not own. They have fought creatures much larger and stronger than themselves because a baby was crying." His voice carried a note of wonder. "It makes no logical sense, your Majesty, but logic has never ruled human behavior." The Emperor was quiet, processing this information. "What about the hatchlings?" he asked. "Why do they respond to this human?" Changed the display again, showing brain scans of hatchlings. "This is where things become very interesting, Your Majesty. Hatchlings are far more sensitive to emotional states than adults. They can feel the difference between someone performing a duty and someone acting out of genuine care. Our nursemaids are excellent at their jobs, but they do their jobs because it is their responsibility. They follow protocols. They maintain proper distance. They do not form personal attachments." "That is proper," said. "Attachments create complications." "For adults, yes, but for bobbies," hesitated. "Your Majesty, I must speak honestly. Our research shows that hatchlings raised with emotional warmth develop stronger fire cores, better social skills, and healthier mental states. Hatchlings raised with only physical care survive, but they often have problems later in life. They struggle to form bonds. They become cold and distant. They rule through fear rather than respect." Felt something uncomfortable stir in his chest. He thought of his own children, raised in the finest nurseries with the finest care. He thought of how they had grown into capable rulers but distant individuals. He thought of how rarely they laughed or showed affection. "You are saying our nursery methods are wrong," he said flatly. "I am saying they are incomplete, Your Majesty. We provide everything hatchlings need to survive, but survival and thriving are not the same thing. Provide something we do not, unconditional emotional warmth. He loves them without expecting anything in return. He holds them without purpose or protocol. He makes them feel safe in a way that schedules and perfect temperature control cannot." Pulled up one final image, a comparison of stress hormone levels. "These are the hatchlings who have been visiting. Their stress hormones have dropped by nearly half since they started sleeping with him. They are eating better, sleeping better, and developing faster than expected. Whatever he is doing, it is working." The Emperor stared at the data for a long time. He had built an empire on strength and discipline. He had raised his family to be powerful and proud. But now he wondered if he had missed something important, something soft and strange that humans understood and had forgotten. "There is one more thing, Your Majesty," said. "The most remarkable discovery." "Continue." "Humans call it skin hunger. It is a psychological need for physical touch that is so powerful, its absence causes measurable damage. Humans who are not touched regularly become depressed, anxious, and physically ill. Their immune systems weaken. Their minds suffer. In extreme cases, human infants who receive food and shelter but no touch will actually die." Could not believe what he was hearing. "They die from not being touched." "Yes, Your Majesty, humans are not simply social creatures. They are creatures of touch. Physical contact is as essential to them as food or water, and this need extends outward. They do not only need to be touched, they need to touch others. They need to hold and comfort and connect. It is a hunger as real as any other." The Emperor thought about sitting alone in the maintenance tunnels, holding sleeping bobbies who were not his own. He thought about the human's words, "I do not have anyone anymore. My family, my world, they are gone." He needs them as much as they need him. Realized? "Exactly, Your Majesty. Lost his entire family in the colony collapse. He has no one to touch, no one to hold, no one to care for. The hatchlings fill that emptiness in him, and he fills the emptiness in them. It is a perfect exchange, both sides giving what the other desperately needs." Stood and walked to the window. Below, the city of Prime stretched out in all directions, a sea of lights and activity. Millions have lived there, working and building and raising families. He had always thought of strength as the foundation of everything. Strength in battle, strength in leadership, strength in resolve. But perhaps there were other kinds of strength. Perhaps there was strength in softness, strength in holding on, strength in loving without reason. "Summon head nursemaid," the Emperor said, "and bring the human as well. I have decisions to make." Bowed and left to carry out his orders. Remained at the window, watching the city below and thinking about everything he had learned. Humans were strange creatures, weak in body but impossibly strong in heart. They loved without logic, protected without profit, and formed bonds that explanation. In a galaxy ruled by fire and power, they had survived through nothing more than stubborn, reckless love. Perhaps thought his people had something to learn from them. Perhaps the future of the Empire lay not in greater strength, but in greater warmth. The old dragon closed his eyes and made a decision. He would not fight this strange human magic. He would embrace it. He would let a janitor teach an empire how to love. It was, he thought, the most surprising decision of his 800-year reign. And somehow it felt exactly right. The Festival of First Fire was the most important celebration in the Empire. Every year, thousands of visitors came to the palace to watch the young dragons breathe their first flames. It was a day of joy, pride, and new beginnings. This year, it became a day of terror. Was on the observation deck, cleaning the windows before the ceremony began. 3 hatchlings had followed him there, as they always did now. Head nursemaid had stopped fighting their escape attempts. The emperor himself had given permission to spend time with the bobbies. The whole palace had accepted that the human janitor had some strange magic over the little ones. The 3 hatchlings with him today were Bora, the brave little female who had found him first, a quiet male named, and the emperor's own granddaughter, a tiny gold-scaled princess named. They sat at his feet while he worked, playing with his shoelaces and chirping happily at each other. Was humming a song his grandmother used to sing when the first explosion shook the palace. The sound was like nothing he had ever heard, a deep, thundering boom that made the floor jump beneath his feet. The windows cracked, dust fell from the ceiling. Alarms began screaming throughout the building. Dropped his cleaning equipment and grabbed all 3 hatchlings, pulling them close to his chest. "It is okay," he said, even though he did not know if it was okay. "I have you, stay with me." A second explosion came, closer this time. Through the cracked windows, could see fire and smoke rising from the lower levels of the palace. Emergency lights flashed red. Voices shouted commands in that he could not understand. A terrorist attack. It had to be. Had heard rumors of groups who opposed the emperor's peace treaties, radicals who believed the empire should conquer rather than cooperate. They had threatened violence before. Now they were delivering it. His first instinct was to run toward safety, toward the emergency shelters, toward the guards who could protect him. But as he turned to go, he heard something that stopped him cold. Crying, children crying. Not from the direction of the shelters, from the direction of the explosions. The diplomatic quarters. The visiting delegation from the outer colonies had brought their young ones to watch the festival. They were in the wing closest to the blasts. For one terrible second stood frozen. Every intelligent thought told him to run the other way. He was one small human. He had no weapons, no armor, no fire. What could he possibly do against bombs and terrorists? But then he looked down at the 3 hatchlings in his arms. They trusted him completely. They believed he would keep them safe. And somewhere in the burning wing of the palace, there were more children just like them, scared, alone, and crying for help. Thought of his little sister. He thought of how he had tried to carry her to safety and failed. He thought of waking up on the rescue ship and learning she was gone. He could not let that happen again. He could not. "Hold on tight," he told the hatchlings. Then he ran toward the fire. The diplomatic wing was chaos. Smoke filled the corridors. Debris blocked the main paths. Adults were shouting and pushing, trying to find their children, trying to escape, trying to understand what was happening. No one noticed the small human running against the flow of traffic, clutching 3 bobbies to his chest. Found the first group of children in a collapsed meeting room. 8 young, ranging from toddler to young adolescent, were huddled in a corner while a piece of the ceiling burned above them. Their adult guardians were nowhere to be seen, probably trapped under the debris or killed in the initial blast. "Come with me," shouted. "I know a way out." The children stared at him with wide, terrified eyes. A human, a small, soft, fragile human, telling them to follow him. The oldest adolescent stepped forward. "Who are you?" "My name is, I work in the palace. I take care of the bobbies in the nursery. Please, we need to go now before the fire spreads." The adolescent looked at the 3 hatchlings in his arms, including the golden princess, the emperor's own granddaughter. Something in his expression changed. If this human was trusted with royal children, perhaps he could be trusted now. "Follow him," the adolescent told the others. "Move quickly." Led them through corridors he knew well from his months of cleaning. The main routes were blocked, but maintenance passages were not. He squeezed through gaps in the walls, crawled through ventilation shafts, and guided the young through spaces that were too small for adult dragons. A third explosion rocked the building. Part of the ceiling collapsed behind them, blocking their path back. Felt blood running down his face. A piece of debris had cut his forehead, but he kept moving. The hatchlings in his arms clung to him than ever. The older children followed close behind, their eyes full of fear but also something else. Trust, hope. They were almost at the emergency exit when heard more crying. 3 more young ones trapped behind a wall of rubble. Without thinking, he handed his 3 hatchlings to the adolescent. "Take them outside," he said. "I will get the others." "You are bleeding," the adolescent said. "You should come with us. I will be right behind you. Go." The young hesitated, then nodded and led the group toward the exit, turned back toward the rubble. It took him 10 minutes to move enough debris to reach the trapped children. His hands were bleeding by the end, his clothes torn, his body shaking with exhaustion. But he got them out. He pulled them through the gap one by one, 2 small hatchlings and 1 older female who had broken her wing in the collapse. "Can you walk?" he asked the female. "Yes," she said, her voice tight with pain. "But I cannot fly or run." Then we walked together, carried the 2 hatchlings and helped the injured female limp toward the exit. Every step felt harder than the last. His head was pounding, his vision blurring from blood loss, but he kept moving. He could not stop. He would not stop. They were almost at the exit when a 4th explosion went off, closer than any before. The force of it threw off his feet. He twisted in the air, curling his body around the hatchlings, protecting them with everything he had. He hit the ground hard. Pain exploded through his back. Something sharp had struck him. He could not feel his legs properly. But the hatchlings in his arms were crying, which meant they were alive. Alive was good. Alive was everything. "Go," he told the injured female. "The exit is just ahead. Take them and go." "I cannot leave you." "You can and you will." His voice was surprisingly firm. "Those bobbies need to get out. You can walk. I cannot. Take them and do not look back." The female stared at him for a long moment. Then she gathered the hatchlings, turned, and limped toward the exit as fast as she could. Lay on the ground, alone in the smoke and fire. He could not move. He could not feel much of anything anymore. But somewhere above him, he heard the sound of children's voices, scared but alive, moving toward safety. He smiled and closed his eyes. When the palace guards found him 20 minutes later, he was unconscious but still breathing. A piece of metal the size of a hand had lodged itself in his back, missing his spine by less than a centimeter. He had lost more blood than most humans could survive losing. But around him, clutched in his arms, were the 3 hatchlings who had refused to leave him, Bora and the Golden Princess. They had found their way back to him somehow, crawling through the debris to reach him after the other children escaped. They were chirping softly, pressing their small, warm bodies against his cold skin, trying to keep him warm the way he had kept them warm so many times before. The guards had to pry them away from him to get him to the medical bay. The hatchlings screamed in protest, tiny flames shooting from their mouths, their claws scratching at anyone who came near. They did not understand why their human was being taken from them. They only knew that he was hurt and they needed to stay with him. Across the burning palace, in a command center filled with emergency reports and urgent decisions, Emperor received word of what the human had done. 14 children saved. A janitor who had run toward danger instead of away from it. A creature of soft flesh and fragile bones who had given everything to protect bobbies who were not his own. The old emperor closed his eyes and felt something he had not felt in centuries. Humility. Woke up slowly, like rising from deep water. Everything was bright and clean and strange. He was lying on something soft. The air smelled like medicine and flowers. Strange, humming sounds came from machines he could not see. He tried to move, and pain shot through his body. A soft hand pressed against his shoulder, keeping him still. "Do not try to get up," a voice said. "You are still healing." Blinked until his vision cleared. He was in a medical room, the most beautiful medical room he had ever seen. The walls glowed with soft blue light. The bed beneath him seemed to float on air. Advanced healing equipment surrounded him, technology worth more than he could earn in 1,000 lifetimes. And standing beside his bed was Emperor himself. Tried to sit up anyway, tried to bow, tried to show proper respect. The pain was immediate and terrible. "I told you not to move," said, but his voice was gentle rather than angry. The healers have done excellent work, but your body needs time to finish repairing itself. You were badly injured." "The children," whispered. "Are the children all safe, every single one?" The Emperor moved to a chair beside the bed and sat down. Even seated, he towered over the small human. 14 young ones escaped the attack because of you, including my own granddaughter, who had wandered from the nursery to find you before the explosions began. Remembered little, her golden scales shining in the sunlight. She is okay. She is more than okay. She has not stopped talking about her brave human since the attack. She told me that you ran toward the fire to save bobbies you did not know. She told me that you gave her to another child and went back into the smoke to rescue more. She told me that even when you were hurt, you made the others leave and stayed behind alone." Tears were running down's face. He was not sure when they had started. "I could not leave them," he said. "I could not." "I know." His voice was very soft. "Explain to me why humans do what they do." She told me about your bonding instincts, your need to protect, your inability to ignore a crying child. I thought I understood, but seeing what you did, now I truly understand. The Emperor paused, gathering his thoughts. When he spoke again, his words carried the weight of centuries. "Do not forget our debts, human. You saved 14 children. You nearly died protecting my granddaughter. By the ancient laws of my people, I owe you a debt that cannot easily be repaid." He leaned forward slightly. "Name your reward, wealth, lands, a position of honor, anything within my power to give. Ask, and it is yours." Was quiet for a long moment. He looked around the beautiful room with its advanced technology and expensive equipment. He thought about wealth and comfort and all the things he had never had. Then he thought about little Bora finding him in the dark. He thought about quiet trust. He thought about pressing her warm body against his cold skin while he lay bleeding on the floor. "I keep taking care of them?" he asked. His voice was barely more than a whisper. "The hatchlings, I mean, not as a janitor, but properly, officially." He struggled to find the right words. "I do not have anyone anymore. My family, my world, they are all gone, but those little ones, they need someone, and I need someone to need me. I know I'm just a human. I know I'm nothing important. But if I could just stay with them, take care of them, watch them grow up, that would be enough. That would be more than enough." The room was very still. Emperor stared at the human for a long time, his ancient eyes unreadable. Then he did something that shocked everyone in the room. He bowed his head. "There is a title," the Emperor said slowly, "that has been empty for 3,000 years. It was called the Royal Guardian. It was created during the First Alliance, when humans and dragons stood together against the Void. The humans who held this title were responsible for the emotional of the royal hatchlings. They provided something that dragons alone could not: warmth without purpose, love without condition, protection without question." Raised his head and met's eyes. "When the human fell, the last royal guardian died. We never replaced the position. We told ourselves it was not necessary. We told ourselves dragons were strong enough on their own." He reached out and placed his massive clawed hand over a small human one. The contrast was striking: scales against skin, strength against softness, fire against warmth. "I was wrong," the Emperor said. "My ancestors were wrong. We forgot that strength comes in many forms. We forgot that the fiercest protection can come from the gentlest heart. We forgot that sometimes the most powerful thing in the universe is someone who simply stays." He squeezed his hand gently. "I would be honored, truly, deeply honored, to restore the title of Royal Guardian to you, to have my raised by one who would bleed for them, to show my empire what humans truly are. Not weak, but gentle, not fragile, but brave. Not simple, but full of a love so fierce it frightens me." His tears were falling freely now. "You want me to be a guardian for the royal family, for all the children who need you, for every hatchling who cries in the night and needs someone to hold them, for every lost little one who needs to know that someone will always come when they call." His voice was warm with emotion. "You have been doing this work for months without title or recognition. Now I am giving you the recognition you deserve. Accept this honor. Accept your place among my people." Could not speak. He nodded, tears streaming down his face, his whole body shaking with emotions he could not name. The door to the medical room burst open. 3 hatchlings rushed in, Bora, and followed by a flustered head nursemaid who had clearly failed to keep them out. The little ones scrambled onto his bed, careful of his injuries, but desperate to be close to him. "Human," chirped, pressing her golden snout against his cheek. "Our human, stay forever." wrapped his arms around them as best he could, pulling them close, feeling their warmth against his healing body. "I am staying," he promised. "I am not going anywhere. I am yours." Emperor watched the scene with something like wonder on his ancient face. Beside him, wiped at her eyes, her professional composure completely forgotten. "Thank you," said to the Emperor, his voice muffled by the hatchlings surrounding him. "Thank you for letting me keep them." "Thank you," replied, "for teaching us what we had forgotten, for reminding us that strength is not always found in scales and fire. Sometimes, perhaps most of the time, it lives in soft hands and stubborn hearts." 10 years passed. The royal nursery of the empire was unrecognizable from its former cold perfection. Colorful paintings covered the walls, made by hatchlings and humans working together. Soft music played during rest time. The thermal nests had been replaced with something guardian called cuddle piles, big soft areas where bobbies and caregivers slept together in warm, tangled groups. Head nursemaid, who had resisted every change at first, was now Guardian's most devoted assistant. She had watched too many hatchlings thrive under his care to doubt the human way any longer. Across the empire, things were changing. Human caretakers were being recruited for nurseries on dozens of worlds. The old beliefs, humans as weak, humans as simple, humans as lesser, were crumbling in the face of undeniable truth. Guardian sat in the center of the main chamber, reading aloud from an old Earth fairy tale. Around him, 17 hatchlings listened with complete attention. The Emperor's granddaughter, now a fierce young dragon who had earned her adult name, still insisted on sleeping in her guardian's room. When asked why she preferred the human's simple quarters to her royal chambers, she always gave the same answer. "Because he stays. He always stays." The story of the human janitor spread across 12 star systems. It became a legend, a reminder, a lesson that changed how the entire galaxy thought about strength and love and what it meant to be brave. Humans, the story taught, loved like no other species. They loved without logic, without profit, without end. They loved things that could not love them back. They loved things that might destroy them. They loved and loved and loved until loving became its own kind of power. And the dragons, ancient and proud and fierce, had finally learned to love them in return.